Throughout history, truly spiritual people are born incredibly happy, filled of life, joy, simple joy, humility, kindness. And at some point in their life, they have a destiny, and they realize that, but the point is to communicate to a darkened world, a place without light, literally without light. All mystic traditions have said that the world literally is a hell, an illusion. It's a death chamber for the heart and soul. And the spiritually awake have to learn that at a point. I'll say for me as an example, because there are hundreds of millions, and this is going somewhere for all of us. It just hit me to include this. I know my friend Robert was killed. We were in Vietnam and Marine Corps, and then we were ordered to pull back after doing this long 20, 30-minute battle, and we're walking back, and my best friend was killed, and I saw my buddy Sergeant Suggs, the mortar sergeant. He's always carrying 100 pounds of stuff on his back because he's the mortar sergeant, and big, giant chested, like teacher like my buddy Greg here, both black belts, and taught everyone karate. And we were looking, as you're just passing on the trail because you can't do anything but keep going. In other words, grief doesn't matter when you have what you have to do. And that'll be the point that we're moving into in the next 5 minutes. So I just looked at Joe and looked at each other. We never talked about personal feelings. We just had a happy time. We'd go to South Carolina or San Juan or Cuba, and we just had a good old time. And just in the morning, make sure the officer checking us out on inspection didn't get too close or light a cigarette. And so we were happy, and we just looked at each other for that moment, and all the tears and the grief had to be explained. Joe, they killed Robert. But it was a great intensity emotion, and you had the next split second, keep moving, keep walking, and lost my brother, James, and same thing right after Vietnam and from Vietnam, and 4 sisters, and they grieved, and my mother, and I cannot imagine that kind of grief. I think if, like, I know my favorite painter is Van Gogh, just for different reasons, because it looks like someone that I know, an actual living sunflower. And but if he were to paint something so dreadful, so awry from normal human wakefulness and existence and civilization. You know, we've all seen horrible photos and so forth of war-torn areas, but I guess if he were to, with his masterful strokes, to create a painting of so grievous you really can't look at it, it would be a mother looking into her empty arms. Does this make sense? So if my friend loses pets, or, you know, something that's with you. Before we talked about, you know, you can be in a bad place, an apartment for 12 years and not have one happy day there, and yet when you leave, your heart cries out and you miss it. You know, because you scattered so many parts of your heart into it, trying to bring back that decency, that kindness, that humility, that joy that all spiritual people live with in their early years. Until these grievous and momentous points in our life begin to occur and take their toll. It can be lost love, or love found, where you have to give up other areas of your life that you thought you cherished. So we're always making decisions. And the one decision a spiritual person has ever known is separateness. You have to walk away from the world of separatists. I hope all this mingles in your mind. It's very free-floating, like a little early snowfall, until we gather momentum. So we realize at a point, if we're spiritual, we really can't have love. We really can't own something or contain anything in the world. We only have that which to give. because we might not be conscious of exactly the states or levels of awareness we have when we grow up, because we're just feeling inundated by visions and happiness and dreams. So we learn to begin to disassociate ourselves from the world seen to God unseen. In other words, there are no borders to engage with in spiritual consciousness, and you're always a part of God. And so you grow up and realize you can't have or own or contain anything in the world, you can only give. So you really can't, I'll speak for spiritual people I'm aware of, you really can't have a family or really be fulfilled in your work life, because there's a higher agency at work within you that's called God, God the Father, the unending spirit of eternity, which is transcendent of the whole world, which is where we began, because there is no separation to the love we have for a lost pet, child, family member. And if you're spiritual, you can walk through grief somewhat more quickly, but then at a point you'll find something or someone to love. And you'll always have to give that thing or that person up. Always. For me, it was a friend that I knew 50 years ago that I recognized, I don't want to say like reincarnation, had a certain relationship a very long time ago, and realized that that person had lost something of their sanity from whatever happened, tragically, a long time in the past. And the world being what it is, I couldn't heal or help this person because I had to fulfill this destiny. So I lived in grief for 50 years for that person, and then met my friend Kathleen, who was a great teacher of mine, and couldn't be near that person. So I've grieved over that loss. When you meet someone that's that rewarding and fulfilling in a spiritual sense. So the idea of being separate from anyone for a spiritual person, not that it's any more grievous, but in the sense of this talk it is, when you begin to experience the separations that people have from one another in this world, it takes its toll. And the more spiritual you are, the deeper this sense of loss and longing can be. Although again, we'll never match a mother losing the one she loves. Rolling it all together now is the fact that there is a condition called spiritual illumination. And if you have a destiny, something to fulfill in this world, part of the necessity to learn to communicate with people would be to live with grief. So you'll meet teachers or holy ones or ones that you are in love with. Lose a family member, a mom, a kitten. That's basically you've given your soul to. And that has given its heart and soul and mind and body to you. So you learn the ways of the world by grieving for it. For me, the point is, with this message right now, that for some reason, the teachers I call the holy ones have given me permission to let go of my grief today and regain the sense of joy. In other words, all these things are guided by a very delicate touch of God. We're here to fulfill a mission. So if my friend Susan is mentoring a teenager with an orphan or whatever, then you have to somehow instill a sense of values into a child's life that doesn't have true parenting around them. And you have to somehow, in a sense, almost artificially instill this discipline. And yet, with that, you might work harder than a parent because you're turning yourself inside out to teach, to discipline, to care for, to provide sanctity, sanctuary. So what I'm saying with this is we as instruments of the divine are being guided, led. Use myself as an example, hundreds of millions of spiritual people in the world, everyone equally spiritual. And so the hand of God is teaching us the fact that people in the world really experience themselves as separate beings. My friend, my dad, my dog, my sister, my cat, it's my car, a spiritual person, and I'll speak for all of us, does not experience that. There's no separation. There's oneness. And we look through all the images, all the black and white photos of it, and just see God, always. And everyone's heart and soul, and we're always not displeased, but shocked that people don't understand that. And we're continually hurt by it, and so that's the mechanism we use to employ our sound senses and our intelligence to try to figure some way to communicate to each person who is different in the whole world about this great mystery that we contain and maintain in our heart. Just like a beautiful garden. You have to understand everything about the rhythm of the earth, what attracts this bird or that, or feed this, or they work together. Or I had a farm in outside Philadelphia we employed biodynamic farming. It was a big deal. And where we plant certain rhubarb here because we had this here, or strawberries there, and a certain kind of insects that went for this plant wouldn't go through the rhubarb, and it gets complicated like that. And so my teacher Susan certainly has a garden like that, the most beautiful I've ever seen. And but it takes years. We talked about the Japanese gardens where, say, in one area you're sitting on the roof, and I talked about this at my friend Kobuhito, a real true samurai, in other words, an illumined being, and who is famous in the arts. And the point that he build a garden, and you build a little places to live in there, and with thatched roof, and you spend 12 years getting every rock, every leaf, the particular trees, the angle on the roofs, and to have a little tatami mat here, and it was all meant that within some period of time, when there was to be a rain squall or a storm or whatever, you'd sit in this very specific area. Imagine living somewhere with the rhythm of the earth for years or centuries in your family, to have a home like that. Like my friends, it's just a real home. And if people have a real soul, then there's a oneness with it. It's not impressive, you meld into it. It's yours. It's given to everyone and anything equally, even though it's my teachers. So that one area was meant to just, when there be a rain squall, to go sit in that one tatami mat there at that one place and just to listen to the rain. Can you imagine that? That you don't run in the house to turn on the whatever your device, and you just go sit in there quietly and listen to the rain. And that's what meditation is. And every spiritual person is born that way, and a lot of people might think I was special needs when I was a kid because I was too damned happy. But very considerate and humble. I remember opening doors for ants or something when I was 18 months old, and I was just being a gentleman or whatever. And I remember the people looking at me or remarking, and I didn't know what I was doing, except, of course, that's what you do. So you don't learn from school, you learn from knowing who you are as a spiritual being. But you're in this world of separatists who believe there are two people. And as long as there are two people who believe they are a body, there will be problems, traumas, there will be war. So just two people who believe they're contained within their skin and separate from one another. And that's the whole point of everything today. The spiritual person, I'll say like myself, I just long for heaven. And yet I gave it up many, many years ago when I was afforded the gift of being in absolute direct contact with the God of heaven. It's, even though you might be illumined, there are enormous universes of ranges of beingness. And that took me months and months to get to that place where I just looked around in absolute horror at the world, the way it is, that people think they're separate from this beauteous calm. That is the beginning of looking into God. God's face is beauty. It's a presence, it's a spirit, it's a beauty. I look at my friend, my teacher Susan's face, all I see is that. I see Van Gogh, and like I spoke about that before, how did this man do the sunflower? I sat and looked at it, even though I think I just got back from the East, where I was a very beautiful holy place, and I sat and looked at there on this little touch of canvas and a whole lot of paint, and put the beauty of God on canvas. And you'd have to see it. And I'm sure we all have a photo, a picture, something, a work of art. My friend's child, Zachary, it's like some beings have that completeness, and they can play out their part in this world with great dignity, and yet they're not of this world. You are not of this world if you are spiritual. And the point we're making right now is that if you are spiritual, you'll be slapped in the back and the head and hit with a stick more often than others will. And your pain will be a lot more severe. You'll never complain about it. And I say a lot more severe because you're a spiritual being. And you volunteered out of the heavens to come here and clean this mess up. So the pain that you feel of being unwanted, separated out, attacked by people in the world is more than others, more than mortals. We feel the pain of God because we're all equal parts of God. There's one God, one Spirit, one eternal presence. And yes, it's holy, and yes, we revere it, but it's so wonderful, so clean, so good, so human. God is a spirit. It's not the great void, like they say in the East, the great emptiness. It's the great, or openness, it's the great fullness. God is a human presence. We represent that. The only place in the universe that is where separation occurs is in this dream state. And when you let go and you start falling in these conditions of samadhi and so forth, they call it, or divine revelations, the vision of God, the beatific vision, when you start falling into these states, and everyone in this room has known that, and everyone in the world has felt that. The most evil person in the world has at different points feel you can't not walk through this stuff. You can't be that crazy. I'm not saying there are not incredibly evil beings. There are, and they're a lot crazier than are embodied. They are, if you're on a drug high or something, come down, or you go through absolute grief and there's something horrible, or like me being in a war situation, wherever you see things that you can't imagine that are even worse than the visible damage to bodies and lives and civilizations. There are other civilizations that are dark, and the whole world is built up. If you can see the vision, I can see like rooms of these beings with what do they call those tall black, this dungeon, those hats, those conical hats that are black, and they're in prayers like my Tibetan friends would be, but dark ones. They're trying to make all this insane crap happen that the world is, and it's actually behind the scenes with all of it. That's why we called it kabuki theater, or like Plato called it the shadows on the wall, meaning the socio-political atmosphere, but what's really behind it is a lot more devious, a lot uglier, but at the same time, when there's beauty, there is, you got Van Gogh's living manifestations in front of you, because they are a reflection and a projection of God into the world to help save the world, which means illumine in the scripture. So we're here to illumine one another, and if we're spiritual, we'll feel the pain of God. Imagine that. But we'll never complain about it. We'll never bring that up in conversation. This is a moment where we're communicating with one another about these issues, so we're free to speak and say that the gravity of what we feel, the trauma is a living grief. It's God grief for the whole world, even though it doesn't exist. Somehow we that are human have to end it on God's behalf, who is our Father. Now you have to be able to be very open in your consciousness and awareness to understand it's like being a mom. You feel everyone's pain, and the in-laws and their pets and their boss, for your sisters or mothers or whatever. It gets crazy. But the more spiritual you are, the more aware you are, the more community-centered in a spiritual sense you are, you feel everyone's grief, everyone's pain, and everyone's trauma, and it all has the same basis, that someone out there actually believes that there is a world when there's only heaven. There's only God. That's what meditation, ritual, steps us away from grief to bring us back to that continuity of the spirit, that fullness, that openness, that wholeness that you'll feel in my friend's garden, where the natural world and the supremely beautiful dignity and beauty of God himself is our one presence. So if there's a rainstorm, I'm going to go to my friend's garden and sit out back and just listen to it. And if I drown, that'll be okay. Because my body, my spirit will be in a place of oneness. So we create beauty to help step away from the world seen to the spirit unseen. And unbeknownst to most people, those who live in a world of separatists. So somehow God orchestrates this circumstance where the more spiritual we are, the more horrible the world is to us. Not because God wants us to be in pain or we want to, but we have to understand what we're dealing with, because our tools have to be exquisite. We can't just make a speech on a Sunday morning, or you call it in the church and slam that Jesus this and that, and people get enthralled. Yeah, it feels true, but that's not it. Your sensory equipment have to be like Van Gogh, like Susan, like awe-inspiring. There are people like my friend that can run whole cities and at the same time never lose their femininity and their dignity and their awareness of beauty. My friend Master G here teaches little children all the time, and I just want to cry when I watch it. Not cry, but just your heart is so welled up. He gets families and little 3-year-olds, and they're bowing to the teacher and they're kicking and punching each other, but with an understanding that how powerful each human person and body and emotions are, and what dignity is, and what fairness is, and what being able to take it is, and what being able to have to give it from time to time. I mean, you have to step in with a certain intent. If you want to really fight someone, if you really want to protect your family, which was why, like my friend Kobuhito, a samurai family, you learn from childhood the martial arts. And it's not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you want to protect your family, your village. What do you want to protect? You want to protect civilization. That's why men become tough when they're sane, not because they want to act out on a Friday night or be proud, but because they're humble and kind. My friend Greg's never expressed hairline of a sense of toughness, and he's a 10th degree martial artist. So it's, and with that you have to learn the arts. You have to be a great painter. If you're going to be a samurai, you also have to learn, not just to cut a head off or have yours taken off without fear. In other words, without fear, in other words, if that's what it takes, you're protecting civilization, you're not protecting your neck. So there's a place of sublime selflessness in spiritual consciousness, where you give up everything and anything in order to maintain and perpetuate this sense of beauty. People have it in their sense of civilization, or their town, or their home. Imagine for spiritual consciousness itself, we have to be sublimely delicate and aware of what we're protecting. So we can't go out with a stick and beat anyone. We have to be aware of what exactly for each person there's a next step. So you have to be, you'd make Google blush, you'd make you're beyond your heaven's mainframe. You will know exactly with each person what has to be said, done, what kind of last night I did something I'll call miraculous without a doubt, helping someone, and at the same time there was someone, a great big crazy guy, trying to do everything to disrupt me, and just stayed on it for hours while I'm trying to do a healing of a magnificent soul. And so I had to be aware of all these things that could have erupted into pure violence, and at the same time, because I had to make the stand and I had to do this. That's what I'm saying, but from a lifetime of learning all these subtle tools, these spiritual enhancement techniques, you'll get to that place. You'll hang on the cross without crying. And your mother will lose her mind watching you die. And maybe you run into her a long time after that. Forget the Bible, there is reincarnation. Jesus talked about it. Who do you think John the Baptist is? He said, if you will, he said, if you could handle it, he is Elias, or Elijah rather. In other words, it's a spiritual text, and it's religions take these things over, so you can go there and pay money and whatever and perpetuate that, and that certainly has its place in the world. It's one of the stepping stones. It's like building the garden, but the actual garden itself maintains the beauty and dignity of its author. So we move with the rhythm of the earth, and we understand everything. It's beyond what is termed a genius in this world. And you have it, they call it mental, emotional genius, or intelligence. You have a soul's intelligence. Once you mature in this world, once God allows you to go through these areas of separation where you lose people, love, and like I mentioned my two teachers early on, I couldn't ever see or be near because the world is so absolutely crazy. And so for me, I could never have anyone near me because I always knew they would be a target. Imagine that. The more spiritual you are, the more alone you must be. I can't imagine what someone like Gandhi felt. I went to his place in India and understood it, but still couldn't imagine it. I mean, that kind of strength and dignity, only rare individuals in all history have had to walk through. Take beatings to maintain a sense of love and honor and dignity for everyone, including people who just hate you around the clock and want to kill you and your family, and do kill millions of your friends and your followers in a spiritual sense. Gandhi was known to be an Illumined teacher, which he is and was, and that's what moved him forward. But we're not asked to hang on a cross or take a beating. We're asked today to be so quiet inside, so aware, so conscientious about helping others who can be pulled out of the fire, the last burning embers of disbelief and faithlessness. We have to illumine, save our brothers and sisters who are lost in the muck, the mediocrity and the stupidity of this world. So however you count it, it's a spiritual war. There's God, there's truth, there's honor, there's dignity, there's relevance, there's healing, there's intelligence, there's awareness, there's cultivation. There's so many ways to share the orchestral sounds of heaven. It's a beautiful place. And it's never been further than our very next breath. There are different forms of breathing, like my friend has a problem with his back, but he keeps wanting to fix it at the gym. All you have to do is, I do not do these practices, I never have. I can see them and sense them, but I've always known you don't have to do anything to feel God. You don't have to do yoga. You don't have to sit a certain way or walk a certain way or believe anything. You just have to see God. It's no more than that, no less. So I've never been lost in the jingle jangle of some teaching or teacher. It's just, there's God. So I say my friend with his physical problems, and he'll do this kind of chiropractic or that, which, you know, and my great teacher of my life was a chiropractor, but had these other gifts. The point is that if you want to change something in your body, you simply, rather than breathing down and have your stomach full, you breathe and have it expand laterally. You're breathing. And then the body parts, ligaments, tendons will all move in a certain direction, because underneath it, like they always in India call it the chakras, you have certain centers, like your heart. I have something that fills my heart, my teacher. And so after many, 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 many years, I'm allowed to open my heart and love something that won't be taken from me, or it won't be hurt because of my closeness to it. Do you understand? As a spiritual person, you always feel like everyone's parent. And you are, because the Almighty, God Himself, looks out from your eyes, listens with your ears, and that's all is required in spirituality. Because our church is not Sunday morning, it's from dawn in the garden until dawn. That's the church. It's consciousness, it's quiet, it's respect for life, the sanctity of life, the seriousness of life. So if you know how serious it is, like last night, it was so serious that I had to withstand absolute pain and be able to face down a character beyond belief you'd see in movies, scary at the same time. I had to not react to that and still face it down as it's going on, so I could continue doing the healing for someone that was beyond deserving, and this went on for a couple hours. So the point is, you have to use all your tools. So when you get these down, you're being taught by God, learned by God. So different times in my life where I had to help this or teach that or instruct that or protect this or heal whatever, or make a stand. It's always, you'll see at a certain point what I call the teachers will open up the door for you and show you, okay, you got that down, next case, next case, next case. So I'm saying you're being taught by God. Your education has nothing to do with your degree. I knew this as a child, like school or your books. It's what you learn of life. You can learn from Greg, if you have other problems in your life, and he'll straighten you out in a minute, to all the things you have to do. And in that area of day-to-day living, or if you mentor children or people, you, in any way, you have to, the more you know and the more you've walked through, and the more of God's pain that you feel, the more acutely aware you are of the areas you have to fill in the life of your charge, of those you're given care, that you're giving care to. And if you're spiritual, you know as I've always known, I always felt that I'm the adult. I'm always everyone's dad, and I felt that way from birth. And there's no pride in that, there's no strength. I'm a dad, I'm mature. That's what you feel as a spiritual presence. Hope all this is making sense, that it's very natural to be illumined, to be one with God, to live a life of great dignity and wonder and completeness. And even if you're in great loss, we'll say, as I have been, I'm mentioning that today, there are hundreds of millions of spiritual people. Communicate to them lightly, listen, because they'll close down like anyone else. They have humility. And they never want to say they know this or that better, so you have to be very conscientious when listening to someone like that. You never want to repeat something they said. I call that re-stimulation. When I've done healings with people and I knew they're over a certain issue, like the worst thing in the world you could ever do is to ask, are you sure you're over that? Because after they did all this work and you opened up all these different areas of their consciousness, and they finally got rid of the center point of it, what really chilled them to the bone and broke them. And so when they finally get to express that clearly, even with grief, when I work with people who have great loss, if you let them let go of a lot of that around the other issues that get all caught together, then they can grieve, because grieving itself is an act of love. But when there are all these other associations with it, then it's craziness. My friend, my karate teacher, Sergeant Joe Soga, and myself, and we just looked at each other for a moment. They killed Robert. You know, in the middle of all this horrendous thing, we could grieve for 4 seconds, and then boom. Because we knew we couldn't bring anything else into it. That was that, and we'll deal with that when we deal with that. So I'm saying, he hung on a cross, or Moses couldn't go in to the promised land, or your mom couldn't live long enough to see your life sanctified. In other words, you were successful, you succeeded at life, and that's all your mom wants from you. You see? So I'm saying, let's respect our Father God and fulfill His wish, that there be pain or tears no longer, that the mystery of God should be finished, that the ugliness of this world of separatists should end at some point on our watch, because it could, because it must, because it has to, because it's wrong. The pain, the sorrow, the grief, the violence of the whole world. That's why lovers, when they love, they're just, everything is like Susan's garden. It's beauty and dignity, and the natural world and the world of sublimity of God are one place. That's why we create works of art, works of beauty, dignity. We talked about feng shui, where you make everything move. With my friend Carlos, he walked in my place and fixed things all around the house, and 8 minutes later nothing was jangling, and you had that flow again, like the Japanese garden. Or my friend Kobuhito would make I mixed the name around to keep it his privacy, but the point is, he can make a dish of food that's just is an actual masterwork of art, and he's noted for that. Gray can do that with painting or with athletes. And all we have to do is, with our heart, become quiet and realize we're not the only one in pain, and we don't truly need anything or anyone. That's why in India they'll almost starve to death, but they'll live on very few calories, but they're not dying and not hurting themselves. They're just trying to become invisible. It's like when Ramakrishna told people to have them ask who I am, who you are, or the Zen master would ask, and who am I or who are you? It's not to elicit an answer. It's to witness the dissolution of your own sense of self, that you become one with this, the greatness of God, the great spirit, the great God, the great teacher, the greatness in you and in me, There is a God. We are one presence. There's one people. There's one person. There's one beingness. There's one wholeness. There's one truth. There's one purity and dignity. And it's eternal. And it's you. And it's me. And it's ours. He's ours. We're his. There is a spiritual consciousness. Seek it above all else and everything else. And there'll be no more war, nor hunger, nor pain, nor mystery, or wonder, or need. We're not separate from God. We are God's reflection in a darkened world, in a darkened time. Rage against the dying of the light. You're wonderful, you're good, you're spiritual, you're spectacular, you're brilliant. God knows. Don't worry about the naysayers, the devil, the ones in the long, conical, dark black hats that actually exist and propagate this world. And if you live a spiritual life, you'll see these things, you'll know these things. We all are aware of them in different ways. We're a spiritual people. We're a peculiar people. At a very certain time, to complete something that entails great dignity and purity and power and strength and holiness. And all it is to become quiet and see him, the only God, and be as he is in this world. And this world will no longer be. And there will be no more pain, no more war, no more bloodshed, no more the indignities that this world cast upon us. It's a mistaken consciousness, no more, no less, and it only exists in this infinitesimal space that doesn't even exist. If you're spiritually conscious, you're aware of infinite universes. I am right now, I'm simply saying this on behalf of all spiritual people. There are infinite universes that I'm always aware of, that spiritual people are always aware of, and we can almost never bring them to bear with this world because you have to be, you're working with people who actually believe they're a body, but we have to carry this lighted torch to them one at a time, and that's what we're doing. And yet, to encapsulate this message, of course, telling actual truth, as we did today, is a very dangerous thing in this world. It's like walking with a lighted torch into an ammunition depot. It's quite dangerous. I could say in my circumstance last night and all through my life. God had to teach me very powerful lessons in order to be able to communicate and not act out with violence, or, to know that you can, with your consciousness, become so acutely aware of what's divine and how to communicate that to our friends and loved ones, that we're tougher than steel and we're stronger than the darkness of any night. You are as God is. You will fulfill your spiritual destiny. No, there's nothing wrong with you. Everything that happened was to train you to understand how stable you truly are under it. And you can carry no guilt. It's original innocence. But we learn these things in order to be an appropriate, powerful messenger of the light. And I'll end it with that. Remember, there's nothing wrong with you. Your mission is God. And God is everywhere and everything. And you are everywhere and everything. And thank you. Thank you, Greg.